Welcome back to the AJ Roberts Show on the London Times. Today, we are joined by a familiar face to so many around the country and the world, Mr. Dan Astin-Gregory. Dan, my brother, so good to have you back.
Great to be back. Thank you very much for having me as a repeat guest. It's great to appear once again on your show.
Yeah, and it's obviously we've had quite substantial gaps in between, like when you've been on. There's so much has been happening, not just here in the UK, but all over. But right now in the UK, obviously yourself and a fantastic group of people have come together and formed the Together Declaration, which we can see there in your background. And I wanted to get you on the show today to really emphasize and showcase the importance of it and how powerful it is, so that the wider public can get a grasp of what it's all about and sign up to it, because it is seriously important for the future of not all of us, but obviously the future of our nation, the children, and everyone alike. So yeah, mate, if you want to explain obviously what the Together Declaration is and how it all came about.
Yeah, so I just, in a nutshell, the Together Declaration is taking a unilateral stand against vaccine passports in the UK initially, but we had a lot of outreach from across the world to co-opt the campaign in different countries, because, of course, this is an international problem that we're facing, because these are being rolled out nation by nation, and it's affecting every citizen of the planet as it stands if it continues this way. But by way of backstory, like yourself, you have been, well, I've done over 300 episodes on the pandemic podcast now since late last year, or mid last year rather, and have really looked at a lot of the issues that have come from the pandemic response, the political response to the virus. And many of these things have actually led to these types of initiatives like vaccine passports. All of the kind of fear-mongering that we've seen off the back of the virus, the lack of appropriate presentation of kind of risk profile, all of these things have created conditions where people are still, today we were discussing offline, still frightened, and as a result it creates opportunities for governments and those in power to bring forward policies like these as a proposed solution. The irony is you've got governments saying that we need to bring these vaccine passports out to reopen the economy and reopen society, despite the fact that now, in the UK at least, we've been open since mid-July fully. We've been out of a full lockdown for a period of time, and society is open. So we're now saying we need these things to open society, yet society is already open. So the reality is there is very little, if any, scientific basis for the use of vaccine passports. I'm sure you've examined all of those kind of factors on your show, but simply put, the vaccines themselves don't prevent transmission or infection, and ultimately many of the arenas where these things are supposedly going to be used, nightclubs, concert venues, sports clubs, are, without stereotype, are typically not actually attended by those who are typically at risk. And you still get all the old arguments that, if this person gets sick, then it passes on to another. But all of these problems are predicated on the idea that asymptomatic transmission is a major problem, which the scientific evidence is completely negligible around this, that if you don't have symptoms, that it's alleged that you can pass on this virus. Whilst it may be possible, it's very unlikely. So you're creating a situation where you're allowing people into a nightclub, for instance, only if they've been double vaccinated or fully vaccinated, which we'll talk about in a minute, because it's a new term that they use now instead of double vaccinated, because double vaccinated doesn't necessarily mean fully vaccinated anymore. But we're basically treating people on this premise of asymptomatic transmission, that we are we are sick until proven to be healthy. We've endured this mentality for, I say endured, but don't make mistake that for saying enjoyed. It's certainly not an enjoyment. We've endured this premise for a long period of time now. And I said to another podcast host just the other day, how many days in a row have your individual members of your audience been healthy throughout 2020 and 21? No signs of sickness whatsoever. There's certainly no signs of respiratory viruses like the COVID-19. Yet you've been separated from your friends, your family, based upon these mandates and restrictions, largely due to this principle, which still underpins what we're facing today. So we've got this situation where people are presumed sick until proven healthy. which is such a flaw. But to me, there's lots of different scientific arguments against the use of vaccine passports, and that can be, you can get into contention and debate around all of that till the cows come home. The point is, this is a principle. This is a societal, cultural principle for me, and it's about ethics. Because what the vaccine passports will do, and sadly most people, like many of these issues, don't seem to care until it affects them personally or hits them in their backyard. So you feel it yourself. The reality is, what will happen is people will go to clubs or restaurants or bars or on holiday, and they'll suddenly find themselves, they won't be able to take their friends or family or their colleagues because they find out their friends or family haven't been fully vaccinated. And at this point in time, fully vaccinated might mean 2 vaccine shots. Tomorrow it could be 3. The next day it could be 4. Already in Israel, we're seeing the booster shots rolled out, 3 shots, 4 shots. The booster shots have been rolled out here in the UK. So the term fully vaccinated isn't fully defined. So you could very quickly find even with vaccine passports, you think you've done your bit, which you've been told to do, yet all of a sudden you find your access to society limited. Now, the really important point here is, AJ, is that we are at the precipice of discriminating people based upon a human characteristic. Medical status, immunization status is a simple human characteristic. And if you look through history, whether you're segregating based upon race or gender or any other human characteristic, it ends tragically. It ends badly. Yet here we are in the modern world with everything we know about history, suffering from huge collective amnesia, sleepwalking into this idea that it's acceptable to discriminate based upon someone's medical choices. Now, of course, this is clearly going to exacerbate existing discriminations in society. It's going to worsen and widen the inequalities. There was a video going around just recently, kind of directed at the kind of Black Lives Matter movement, because they're saying, "Where are you now?" Because a much smaller proportion of the kind of ethnic communities have been vaccinated. So again, that's a hugely discriminatory measure against those communities. Yet this is something we're sleepwalking towards. And once they're implemented, as they already are in Scotland or Wales, it's very difficult to turn back. But here we are in England now, facing the same, and other parts of the world. So the Together Declaration was born out of this awareness that this was coming. Because we believe that it's time to move forward from this idea of a state of emergency. It's time to move forward from all of the pain and suffering that we've seen over the last 18 months. And it's time to move forward to recover economically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically from all of this. And I say physically as well because the evidence shows that most people, as in a large majority of people, have come away from this health crisis less healthy than they did before they started. You would have thought it'd been a wake-up call. I'm going to take care of my fitness and my health, but of course, how do you take care of your fitness when the gyms have been shut down for so long? I know that you're a military man, that not having access to a gym isn't an excuse, but but for a lot of people, the point is, people have been locked in their homes, sedentary lifestyles have been worsened, people have got less healthy. So in order to move forward now, we have to move forward in a way that leaves no one behind. We've already seen these things deployed in New York. The hospitality sector in New York is apparently down 60% in revenue. 60%. And I spoke to a restaurant owner in London just recently when I was there, and I said, it's currently 10%. It's 10% of the adult population in the UK that haven't been vaccinated. It's around about 25% of the overall population when you look at under 18s and all the controversy around the kind of JCVI and the childhood rollout, which we can touch upon later on if you want. But nonetheless, I said, even if it was just 10%, if you drop 10% revenues in your business, would you be able to survive? And he said, even in the best of times, if they dropped 10%, they would struggle. But after what we've just been through over the last 18 months, if you drop 10%, we're out of business. So the point here is that, yes, we've got to a point where it's become frowned upon if you mention the economy or money around this. But the reality is, the economy is the lifeblood of it's what pays our bills, it's what keeps us employed, it's what keeps small businesses running, and we are 18, 20 months into this now. It is time to start thinking forward. And these vaccine passports really are going to be a huge threat to many different industries. We're already seeing that. I interviewed a business owner from Australia just yesterday. 1 million jobs are going to be lost off the back of vaccine passports. 1 million jobs. This is a sizable impact on an economy like Australia. We're seeing, whilst not directly related to the vaccine passports, it's based upon the same kind of point of medical freedom. We're seeing the care home staff getting decimated this winter. And by the way, these care home staff have worked tirelessly under pressure for the last 18 to 20 months. They've had terrible policies put in their way. We've seen all the controversy around the report that was released yesterday, about how care homes is being woefully mismanaged by the government, not the care homes themselves. But here they are facing... I'm on a rant here, AJ. You can stop me if you wish. Here we are facing the winter, by the way, which is the toughest time for the most vulnerable, where the care homes are going to be decimated of staff. And there's a public consultation, which I'll say why it's inverted commas in a minute, because we've seen a number of these throughout 2020 to 2021. The government puts out a public consultation around a new policy that they want to enact, and they use the responses, no matter how many negative responses they get, to justify their decision. So care homes were first, NHS will be next. You'll see again, going into winter, when we already know, if you look at the last decade's worth of newspaper headlines, irrespective of COVID-19 and the policies that have hammered the hospitals even further over the last 2 years, how much stress and pressure the NHS is under every winter. Yet here we are, the government is about to launch a new mandate which could see thousands of NHS staff lose their jobs. And again, we've talked about protecting the NHS as a mantra for the last 20 months. It's been, in my view, been used by the government as a point of manipulation to manipulate the public. It's been used as a scapegoat, and the NHS, we talk about protecting them. Well, we're not going to be protecting them if thousands of people lose their job, but it's not just about protecting the NHS, it's about the patients, right? So if you get thousands of frontline staff who are taken off duty, which is the people they're talking about removing from office, who's going to look after the patients? So you've got care homes, NHS, during the point of need over winter. So you have to ask yourself, are these mandates really serving the people? What's it all about? And it won't stop at AJ. It won't stop at NHS. We've seen in other parts of the world, Canada, etc., where it's into education, it's into public services like the police, the military, the fire service. All of these vital services are getting decimated by what is the single principle that seems to underpin both vaccine passports and these vaccine mandates, all of which undermine our medical freedom and our right to choose. And our right to choose, by the way, doesn't infringe upon our social duty to take care of one another. It doesn't. Having an individual choice doesn't make an individual a bad person. They're still going to do their bit. All of the evidence shows, and this was in the report from the UK government just yesterday, that people's behaviour in the face of a crisis changes with or without mandates. And we've seen that across the world. People adapt their behaviour based upon the scenario. They don't need to be told. They don't need laws and mandates. People do the right thing for each other. So the idea of stripping people of their medical freedoms is essentially what the Together Declaration is built upon, and states that together we are stronger. We don't want to separate from vaccinated or unvaccinated. We want to link arms, move forward. And I personally firmly believe we cannot leave anyone behind. We cannot widen the inequalities. We cannot discriminate against people. And if we are, people are very passionate about seeing the United Kingdom, Britain succeed off the back of this pandemic. Lots of business owners I know are very anxious about what the future holds. Well, if we are to be prosperous, we are to lead, and we are to retain a strong economy, we will never do that if we're shutting out people based upon their medical choices, whether it's access to society, whether it's access to jobs. So the Together Declaration, it takes a stand saying, look, we want to defend the hard-won rights and liberties that our forebearers created. We need to defend those now. And no matter what people have been through, and a lot of people have been affected by the kind of scaremongering, the behavioral science and the fear. And during those types of time, people may have a bias to safety. They seek certainty. That's a human need. We understand that. But we also need economic certainty, and we also need to recognise that there is major problems in the way that the government has managed the messaging around all of this, and the media. So it's time now that we look forward and stop looking back, come out of fear, and start to move forward together. So the Together Declaration, it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's for us to be together, moving forward, no one left behind, staying strongly no to vaccine passports. Firstly, here in the United Kingdom, but again, increasingly we are being approached by Australia, Canada, New Zealand, America, Italy, Spain, France. We've had all kinds of requests to take this campaign global because people are resonating with the message. Because it's not, well, as I touched upon some of the scientific arguments, it's really about ethics. It's really about society. And it's really about upholding the principles of a free and open society, which, we do not need to compromise on having a free and open society in the face of a crisis. And particularly at the tail end of one. We've seen the worst of it. Well, possibly, who knows what's next, but it seems like the majority, there's a whole raft of other problems which largely are related to the interventions that we've seen through governments and otherwise, but nonetheless the original problems, we've come through it stronger. I was watching the football last night, packed stadium. People are ready to move on with their lives, and we don't need to be shutting people out. So that's why we started the Together Declaration. We've had a coalition of over 200 different groups, business owners, campaign leaders, influencers come together to found the declaration, and now it's had over 100,000 signatures in a very short period of time. But I'm sure we'll see many, many more.
And just on the declaration itself, and we'll repeat it a bit later, but where can people go and immediately, like right now, as soon as they listen to this, to go and actually sign up to that declaration?
Go to togetherdeclaration.org. You can see it on the banner behind me, togetherdeclaration.org. Read the letter. We took time to write this to make sure that it resonates to as many people as possible. We want to appeal to people's collective sentiment that it's important that we retain the values of a free and open society, but doing so in a way that leaves no one behind. That's really our goal. It's about now leading forward. It recognises the concerns that people have had, that we've gone through, because ultimately, it's going to take, people ask, what's a declaration going to do? Well, the reality is we have to remember that politicians serve the interests of the people, and a declaration or a petition or a campaign of this nature is one way that we can send a message to the politicians that a large group of people feel strongly about this. But, I mentioned, AJ, that, we know that 10% of adults in the UK are currently unvaccinated. 25% of the population as a whole, that's if you believe the statistics, and although lots of people are dubious around much of the government data, having seen so many flaws in other areas. But nonetheless, if you take it at face value, we would expect to see at least 10% of the population signing this declaration. But what's been absolutely wonderful, despite the fact we haven't hit that number yet, what's been absolutely wonderful is we're seeing lots of people, whether they're vaccinated or unvaccinated, signing this declaration. We're seeing lots of people who have been double vaccinated or even triple vaccinated coming forward and saying, I may have different views to other people on the vaccines, but I stand for a free and open society. And that's why it's about being together. It's not about your vaccine status. It's the whole point. It shouldn't be about our vaccine status. It's a personal choice, and we want to keep it that way. There's really grass shoots of hope in the fact that people are coming together regardless of their personal choices to defend their right to a personal choice, but also ultimately to defend a free and open society. So go to togetherdeclaration.org, please sign it, please share it. Every signature counts, and you'll see, we can talk about how else we're getting the message out there. The declaration is just one part of the campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as soon as you brought it together, I was like straight in there, Bosch signed it. It was literally that quick. But it's a few things I wanted to touch on there from what you were sharing with us, Dan. I think when you talked about just humanity as a whole, you just come together. And we're seeing that in France pretty much every day. And I've spent a lot of time on my show, really opening the eyes to people of what's happening in other countries around the world. So like you mentioned, here in the UK, we're very much open. So life's very much back to normal, sort of, so to speak, minus the obvious virtue signaling, masks, and a bit of hand sanitizers everywhere, etc. But when countries like Australia, I know you had Craig on the show the other day, Craig Schulz, great guy. He lives in the heart of Melbourne, where it's been absolutely horrendous. And you're seeing people come together there because in the face of literal tyranny. And we're seeing the issues in France where they've obviously brought in these vax passports, and people are defying these businesses. Although the businesses don't want to really be taking part in this, I've seen so many interviews with business owners. People are actually coming together in the streets with like fold up tables, fold up chairs, vax, unvaxxed, all sitting together, eating as normal human beings, like no discrimination, and lining the streets doing so. It's absolutely beautiful to see. And that's the very thing that we don't want to get to, is anything like that. Even the sniff of it. Coming together right now is so important, because all the mandates and regardless of your vaccination status, moving forward very much affects everybody. So all the government decisions moving forward on everything, whether it's good or bad, is going to affect all of us. So there's no good to come of this whatsoever. So it's not just the scientific side of stuff. So I had the fortunate event of having Dr. Peter McCulloch on the show yesterday, which was absolutely fantastic. I know you've had him on yours. He's an amazing guy, and he did the Question Everything Summit, another great talk there. And he shared so much valuable information. Obviously, he touched deep on the asymptomatic side of things, just being, totally debunked it basically. Hence why, you get 80 to 100,000 healthy people sat next to each other in a football stadium, and then funnily enough, there's not an outbreak of COVID.
Yes.
But what we did talk on a lot was, obviously they're pushing for these vaccination statuses and these vaccine passports in a lot of these countries. But what we're just going to find is, as per the British naval ship, as per the cruise ships that we've seen, as per a healthcare setting in Japan, I think it was, they have had massive outbreaks in places where it's just vaccinated people, because the vaccinated people are producing the variants, and on often cases the Delta variant, which is, there's lots of scientific papers being written and published on this. And that's what's going to happen. I've talked to a lot of people about this over the last few weeks, and we're seeing it every day. We saw it this summer. I mean, I've never known so many people, young people, have flu-like symptoms in the summer. But one thing they all have in common, they've all been doubly vaccinated. And it's, and moving forward from that, like you're saying about the vaccination status, fully vaccinated, it's just the goalposts are just going to change to the right all the time. And I'm getting, just like you are, I'm getting people constantly now, family, friends, ex-military, currently serving, are just like, there's no way I'm like going down this route anymore. Many of these have had horrible adverse reactions, unfortunately.
There's lots to unpack there. I think where to start. The thing, you're absolutely right on the. Well, here's the thing. So, fully vaccinated, the terminology went from double vaccinated to fully vaccinated. That was very subtle. You could see it almost overnight in the media, just like that, changed. And part of the reason, like someone like myself, and probably yourself as well, as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, is we're used to working in a world of marketing. We look at how do we get our message out there, how do we promote our products and services. I've consulted with many different businesses over the years. So you understand messaging, and therefore you can see it when it happens. It's just an instant. It becomes instantaneous. It's a power of persuasion that's been used here. So this terminology of fully vaccinated, what people now, this might seem like ultra skeptic to people, but to me, probably not to your audience actually, AJ, but I'm trying to address mainstream public as well as your crew, probably our mutual audiences. But the reality is there is a lot of money being made out of this pandemic, a lot of money. So the wealthiest individuals and companies on the planet have accelerated their wealth over the last 18 to 20 months in ways that, as per most crises, you see the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And one of the biggest winners, of course, is the pharmaceutical industry, an incredible winner. The current rollout campaign is a lottery ticket for many of these companies, particularly those who have the strongest relationships with central governments and the NGOs and the intergovernmental organizations. You might think you're getting the shot which is most effective or most safe, but you're more likely to be getting the shot that has from the companies that have the greatest bargaining power and the greatest relationships with the powers that be. Now that does sound very skeptical, but just enter common sense corner for the minute, which is a phrase I use a lot on the Pandemic podcast. people could understand, regardless of what position you can. There's other people who are just just don't agree with medical interventions, but a large proportion of society would have agreed that we know there's a vulnerable category of people who are vulnerable to this this pathogen and other respiratory viruses. Therefore, it may make sense for a small proportion of society to take steps to limit their risk. A lot of people would get on board with that idea. However, it's gone from that to then over 50s, over 40s, over 30s, over 20s, over 16s, over 12s, and already in other parts of the world, they're talking 6 months plus. And this to me is abhorrent. It's abhorrent. Again, we could get into the discussion around the science around it. I think the science is quite clear. The JCVI in the UK quite clearly said that this is a risk, and it's been politicised now and approved in these younger age groups. But of course, there is so much money on every dose being made. And it's not just the vaccines themselves that are money making. It's the infrastructure around it, the supply chain. This industry is profiting hugely. It's a golden opportunity. And, they have this phrase, never let a good crisis go to waste. And there are several sectors, several industries that have benefited hugely. And I sat down with a good friend of mine. He's been a pharmacist for over 20 years. Really straight shooting guy. Really, he stays out of the politics of it all. But he says, Dan, I've been in pharmacy for 20 years. I studied medical ethics at master's level at university, and it's very clear the influence that the pharmaceutical industry have over policy. But he said, look at how many industries are benefiting from the mandates, the lockdowns. And many of these industries have a huge weight of influence over major governments, over central organizations. So the status quo of being within these restrictive states benefits largely these sectors. And lo and behold, these sectors also have heavy influence over governments. Just case in point. And again, this is all proven. This is fact. If you look at in the first 90 days of 2021, particularly if you look at the US data and other parts of the Western world, the pharmaceutical industry spent more money on lobbying political organizations than they have in history in the first 90 days. And why do you think that is? Again, going back to my point previously about whose shot gets put in whose arm. So there's a lot of money being made here. And why stop at just the vulnerable? That's a fraction of the world. It's still millions of people, billions of people. But why stop there when you can go all the way to 6 months plus or even younger? Probably, I don't think it'll even stop there.
We're seeing it all over, aren't we? Though we're seeing it in Australia more than ever. Because
we are
clear because Dan Andrews, Premier of Victoria, is completely sold out to the devil. Firstly, but completely sold out to China and obviously the pharmaceutical lobbyists. But also, we've just seen the New South Wales Premier. All the rubbish they spouted out of why she stepped down was very Hancock-like, the old Hancock exit. But in fact, we're looking at $68 million of bribe money, basically, to collapse the economy, to indent all these policies on the people. And what we're seeing now, over was literally like single-digit cases initially, and when they locked Sydney down.
Yes.
And this is out in the open now.
Of course it is, but if it's not even, it doesn't take a genius, to look. History shows us that money makes the world go round. Money and power control the world. There's a book called The Establishment, which talks about the informal contracts between the private sector and the public sector. The World Economic Forum, which is allegedly the heart of the global conspiracy theory. It's no conspiracy theory. They are a lobbying body that is essentially a lobby club for the Davos man, as they're called in the mainstream media. Not my words. But they talk about private-public partnerships. They've spent the entire lifetime of their existence gaining power politically, gaining influence, because of course a barrier to progress for many businesses, and this is AJ, I don't know if you've had this revelation as well. I'm an entrepreneur by background, the last 10 years, and before that I was very interested in business. As an entrepreneur previously, I've argued against regulation for businesses because you want to get rid of bureaucracy, make it easy for people to start a business, and I still maintain that. Startups have to go through too many pieces of red tape. There's too much things for new business owners to get their head around. But when it comes to the monopolies that we're seeing, and there's a documentary going around on social media at the minute called Monopoly, which kind of signposts a lot of this. We've reached a point where the Rockefellers of today, or the Zuckerbergs, or the Bezos, the Larry Pages. It's these huge techno titans that have been able to grow unrestrained. You know, when I was studying economics at university, they talked about the Monopolies Commission. Where does that even exist anymore? Because these businesses have grown so big, but they've got so much. And again, they're the businesses that have profited from the pandemic. They're the businesses that are in cahoots, the WEF, the Garveys. You know, there's a very tight knit of businesses and individuals who have taken this paternalistic approach that they are the smart ones because we are so successful that we are the best qualified to solve the world's problems, and you are the naughty children that need to be locked in your homes because we can't trust you to make judgments for yourself. We're going to tell you what to do, and you can't play a role in that. And that's in a nutshell the situation we find ourselves in. Now, what I find hard about this age is that people. The world is full of activism, right? I've been passionate about a lot of issues for many years, but I've never considered myself an activist. I've never been to a march or a protest until 2020. But I've been passionate about a number of issues, and whether it's people who lobby against big agriculture, or the food industry, or issues around climate, they all seem to understand that the root cause of the problem is the centralization of power and the influence of money over industry, which essentially leaves the small man, the small person, i.e. the public in this. I'm not calling us small. That's how they treat us. Leave them off out the equation. But people, for whatever reason, haven't yet at scale drawing the dots that this is a determining factor. I think we've seen such a blur of cases and deaths and fear mongering that it's just put the wool over people's eyes to see what's really happening right now, and people just can't seem to get their head around that this idea of being socially good has been manipulated. It's been and I did a study on Gen Z, the younger generation coming through, because what I've been most shocked about in terms of the protest movement, having become quite active in that, very active in that, too active in that, got no time to myself anymore, with a new baby boy, but nonetheless, very little young people, very few. So when I did a study, I started reading all the kind of industry analysis on the values and preferences of Gen Z. I'm in the UK right now. The point was made that one of their highest values is to do good for society and to do good for one another. And I believe this ideology of doing good for a society has been hijacked. Save lives, protect the NHS. These are mantras they've taken on board. That's why we see this kind of virtue signaling behaviour. And of course, this is a generation, by the way, and this is a worrying fact. And they've grown up on getting their self-worth and self-esteem from hitting the like button, and from the amount of likes that they get and the amount of comments that they get on their social media posts. And I say that's worrying on the basis that I know we've gone full circle here, but vaccine passports are potentially a very strong gateway to not only medical IDs, which they are a form of in the first instance, but broader digital IDs. And again, when this was spoken about in any forum other than the mainstream media last year, it was described as a conspiracy theory. This website ID 2020 was circulating. This is a real website. I don't see how people in the media can describe the pathway to digital ID as a conspiracy when there are millions and millions of pounds, dollars, and different currencies invested into digital identification. As an entrepreneur, I'm always studying industry reports. I want to be on the forefront of technology. I want to be understanding, where the future is going, because I want to help play a role in shaping the future. But interestingly enough, my interest in technology is still there, but I'm like, we need a de-industrial revolution, because this technocratic world, this transhumanist kind of future that's been projected out into the future, which is words that most people don't know. The day-to-day people don't think about terms like technocrat or transhumanism, but they are things that you need to become familiar with, because they are the guiding principles of the likes of the World Economic Forum, who have an enormous influence on the trajectory of the world. But digital IDs, if you read any of the industry reports, and I'm obsessed with it. I love learning about different industries. I'm as curious about the world of business as I ever been before. And there's millions and millions and millions been invested, not just into digital identification, but programmable digital assets that all underpin this idea of social credit type systems, which we've seen in China. So I believe The vaccine passports, number one, are a problem for on the original basis that they've been instigated. But I do believe they're a dangerous they're like a gateway drug for the powers that be into digital IDs. But digital IDs is not just like, people think, a digital ID, it's like having my driving license on my phone or a passport. Well, you could look at it that way. But the moment you start to give government access to private information, it's very difficult to let go of that. And the more you give to governments, the less you'll be able to take away. And the moment they start to enact policies, like we've seen in the vaccine passports, where it's conditional, your access to society is conditional on a behaviour or an immunisation or anything else. It could be, you haven't done your recycling this week, you lose social points, you can't get on the train tomorrow, which we can laugh about here, but that's a reality in China.
It's absolutely.
It's a reality. And people are in the mindset of, it would never happen to us. Mm-hmm. Well, people would have said that about lockdowns prior to 2020. They would have said that will never happen. There are so many things that have happened that people would have said that will never happen. It's a conspiracy, and it's happened.
Well, I mean, the jabs themselves, like right at the start when all the lockdown started, stuff like that, those of us who knew there was an issue here, like myself and you and many, many others, mostly entrepreneurs who outcome think and can kind of like reverse engineer everything and have pretty much got it right all the way along. We were very quick to say they're going to bring something out here. It's going to make a lot of people a lot of money, and they're just going to enforce it. And then we were all talking about this like months ago. You could probably go back to your first broadcast when you touched on a lot of things. And a conversation that I had, most of the people I've fallen out with was along those conversations about, look, this is what they're going to bring out. And now I'm getting quite a few people messaging me going, look, hands up, like, you're totally right. But this isn't a game of like, I told you so. This has always been about the preservation of all life, hasn't it? And, you talked about the issues in China here, and it's very much along the lines of what people's thoughts are on a day-to-day basis, because it's not affecting them right now, and it hasn't affected them right now. So anything outside of that, it's just a load of bullshit. And especially here in England, where the media here in England have done a pretty remarkable job, really, of compressing only what's happening in this country and not showing what's happening in Australia or what's happening in China or what's happening in France, for example, or Canada, because they don't want the British public to see that there is uprisings in all these places. Yes. But in China itself, they've had this digitalization, like I think since 2017. If you jaywalk across the road, like a camera picks your face up, and you get charged at your bank account. So it's been around. It's not a conspiracy. It's been around since 2017, and that's the route that this will go. And it's all started with a digital ID and the fact that everyone en masse was willing to give up their information and conform to what the government said, just to be able to get by on a day-to-day basis. And that's exactly the road we're going to end up going down. Well,
a couple of things on that, and here's why I think it's going to happen, sadly. Firstly, the facial recognition thing, first and foremost. There's this technology called machine learning, and there's all kinds of related technology to this, all forms of artificial intelligence. And the kind of CCTV of the old, where you kind of I remember growing up, these like very slow spinning CCTVs in car parks and things, designed to keep your cars safe, whatnot. Again, this whole idea of safety. But now the CCTV today is, like you say, in China, we have this in the UK already. Facial recognition technology is out there. It's already being deployed. You don't get a letter for your, if someone wants to do, if my neighbour wants to put a dormer up on their roof or build a conservatory, they have to apply for planning. They have to put a thing on the lamppost that says we're thinking of doing this. Whereas your government can change the CCTV so that it can recognise your face without even telling you. It's happening. It's not. Just Google it now if you don't believe me.
It's happening on street lamps, isn't it? Now,
street lamps,
smart cameras.
Yes,
and also is it the sort of like the technology like 5G to be able to 5G to be able to circulate, that are actually getting put on these smart lampposts now, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah, smart lampposts, and they make it sound all fancy. It's called in the AI world, it's called machine vision. It underpins the new technology around facial recognition. And again, all of this stuff around the vaccine passports, one of the primary concerns was privacy. And deplorably, already in the UK, it's been established that the NHS COVID app has been capturing facial recognition data because, of course, smartphones, a lot of people now do facial logins. They use their facial recognition to log into their phone. If you wanted any proof that how sophisticated facial recognition is, how many of you log into your phone with your face? This is everywhere. And it turned out that the NHS app had been collecting facial recognition imagery.
Primed you. It's all primed us ready for this, isn't it? So
totally.
So it's nothing new. Like it's the same as vaccines themselves. So when they really pushing flu vaccines, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, all they've done is just primed the public for times like this. So you think that they're just like any other jab.
Well, it normalizes it. And I was talking to an American health group, and they were saying, I can't quote this. This is not correct data, but it's just in principle, metaphorically. Historically, I think there was something like five approved childhood vaccinations back in the 50s or 60s, or maybe earlier. And then something like the 70s or 80s, it went to something like 20. And now there's over 200 approved vaccinations in America because they changed. Of course, they changed the legislation. Going back to a previous point, how do you think that legislation changed? Do you think government just wake up and do you know what we need is more vaccines? No. Where do they get that idea from? It's from the vaccine industry, the big pharma, and of course that greases the wheel of commerce. I sound, if I could hear myself 2 years ago, if I'm ranting and raving against the powers of commerce and demanding more regulation, I think, who is that guy? But I recognise now, and I've always tried to be kind of balanced politically. I've lived firsthand, like many of us have, is living through the tyranny of the monopoly and that centralisation of power and where that can go. And why I say we need to be worried about not only vaccine passports but social credit systems is this, and it goes back to what I was saying about Gen Z, is that they have grown up in a world where their, like I said, self-esteem, self-worth comes from the amount of likes and engagement they get on social media. They are primed for a technology where their number one value is social good. You bring in a social credit system that rewards them for their behavior, where they can demonstrate their virtue in other ways, and they can, that they almost compete for who can be the most virtuous. All of us, hopefully, want to live with integrity and be good citizens, but we don't want our society to determine what is good or bad, because here's the other problem. It's the moral authority that historically would be determined by the people. In fact, historically, the religious institutions, the churches, etc., would play a major role in determining our kind of morals and values, etc., as well as community level. But this moral authority has now been assumed by, guess what, the same institutions that are profiting from these types of technologies. The moral authority has been assumed by the technocrats. They are determining, and by the way, psychologically, it only takes 10% of a society to believe something to have a ripple effect across the whole of society. That's why very quickly you go from, the science around masks, for instance, saying it makes no sense, to then a piece of science comes out that could be completely flawed, but all of a sudden everyone's talking about you need to wear masks. You can go, once you've got 10% people believing it's the right thing to do, it's a ripple effect across society. The same with mass vaccination, the same with social credit system. So the people in business who stand to gain a lot of money and power from all of these things know this, right? So, but we are at the risk of a generation of people who will not only not resist social credit systems, but they will actually gain value from it because they love living in the world where they get recognized and rewarded for how they're perceived digitally. That's how they live, right? But this is a function of social media. This is like the unforeseen spillover effect from social media. But it's also a reflection of what one of my previous podcast guests talked about, which is a guy called Matthias Desmet. It's had over 500,000 views in the last couple of weeks. He talked about how human beings have background anxieties. We live in the Western world. We live fast-paced, stressful lives. There's so many demands on every human being nowadays that, a lot of people struggle. That's why we've got mental health crisis. And that's just the people who hold their hand up and say, I'm struggling. Whereas, a lot of people, kind of suck it in and which ultimately leads to more problems. We could talk about that another time. But ultimately, if you've got this background anxiety, a crisis comes along like this, it enables people to attach their internal anxiety to an external form of anxiety, so they no longer have to deal with their own problems. Now, we have a generation of people, young people, who have, as I said, are gaining their self-worth from their clicks on social media. Now, I've spent a decade plus in the world of personal development, human performance, human potential, And I can tell you, one of the biggest learnings I've learned, and AJ, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, is that when we detach our self-worth from things external to us and we find our own inner value and our own inner worth and we can claim our inner power, we become truly congruent with our values and who we really are. We truly know ourselves and own our character. And by the way, it's taken me like all 37 years of my life to get to the point where, you know, I feel confident in myself, and I feel like I know who I am, and really embrace my strengths, weaknesses, and flaws, the good, bad, and the ugly. But there are a generation of people right now who are suffering. There's no surprises that these younger people are the ones suffering the mental health crisis, which has been exacerbated no end from lockdowns, etc., worsened. That's why they get many of the problems result in the fact that they get their self-worth and their validation from things external to them, which they cannot control. Mm-hmm. Because our inner validation we can control, how we validate ourselves. So the reason I've gone on a tangent, but this is why I want people to be worried about vaccine passports and social credit systems, which is, the vaccine passports are the gateway to this, is we have a generation of people who won't only not resist them, they will welcome them, because it's how they gain their self-esteem, it's how they validate. I've grown up, and yourself, AJ, in a culture where we value the value of freedom, but we've got a culture now where that value has been dispelled in order to create the conditions where these types of things are happening. But it's important that people, we've got to get out of the kind of argument about the virus and the vaccines and those things and look at the cultural, societal things that are moving, because they are the things that are determining the trajectory of not only where these vaccine passports are going to go for the next 12, 18 months, but beyond, because there is so much being developed in this kind of under this kind of authoritarian, technocratic regime that we've really come to bear witness to over the last 18 months. They've been waiting for a crisis like this to magnify the speed of progress, because under these conditions it's very easy to accelerate your aims and objectives and agendas. And when you use the word agenda, it sounds like there's some conspiracy. It's not. It's all in plain. This is. Even the word plain sight sounds like a conspiratorial term these days, because everyone keeps using it over and over again. Just take some time to read the Great Reset by Klaus Schwab, founder of the WEF. Read the industry reports on digital technology. Read the reports on digital ID, machine vision, all of these things. You will see where society is going. In fact, many people don't know this, but there was an American presidential candidate who formed a transhumanism party and attempted to win the presidential race. This is the direction of trajectory of technology in the world. But like many industrial revolutions before us, most people don't know about it until it's hit them in the face.
Yeah. And exactly that, and as per, I believe it's in that book, you will own nothing, and you will like it.
You'll own nothing, be happy.
Exactly, and that's exactly what's going to happen. And I work with a lot of teenagers. I've seen the effects that lockdowns have had on them. I see the effects of what social media and technology has on them, because I use the example of like trying to give them a team talk before we start the game, and that, like, as soon as you start talking within 10 seconds, half of them are kind of like they're just, not, maybe they just don't like listening to me talk, but they you can just see how easily distracted people are. They can't, they're always thinking about the next thing all the time. It's just it's nuts, and they're never present, I find. And it is a scary path to go down. And I've had lots of conversations with teachers, and I know you do as well, about like the mindset and the mentality of them. And not just with everything going on at the minute, but like, I don't know if I could be a teacher. Like, I love teaching and developing people, but I just think it's just a constant battle nowadays. But one that we need to like identify these major issues and really get a hold of now. Open up the eyes, these kids, and just say, look, if you don't wake up along with adults, and smarten up, we're going down a very, very dark path. And it's they're the ones that are going to be affected the most, because they're the future of this country. Just like the young men and women who sacrificed absolutely everything, in our World War IIs, who are of similar age, of similar ilk, who fought for our very freedoms that are slowly being taken away under the eyes of everybody right now. And it's a very, very scary time that we could be facing if people don't remember that clearly, And that should be in the forefront of our mind, what everyone gave everything up for. But secondly, looking forward into the future, not right now in your own little circle. You need to look outside that circle. Just because your life might seem all rosy right now, I can tell you now things can change like that. Not just because obviously the introduction of these vaccines, but obviously the potential introduction of social credit systems and vaccine passports. So it's a huge topic to bring to the forefront and make people aware of, mate. Absolutely.
No, thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, in summary, I know I've gone on a projection of where things could go, but I've spent my life doing this as an entrepreneur. It's what we do. We try and predict the future by creating it. Often in our industries, it's the best. And my closing message to everyone is that the best way to predict your future is to focus on creating your own. Many of us feel strongly about the trajectory that the world is going in right now, and I think it's down to us to course correct the way in which the world is unfolding. Many people are looking for heroes, but the only hero you need is the one looking at you in the mirror. You touched on some personal development pieces within this, but I believe it's time now. If you're listening to this, watching this now, look yourself in the mirror tonight and recognize the hero within, because a lot of people are looking at AJ and all his guests, and they're doing great things to try and advance the movement. But it's not which is great. But each of us has to play our part in changing the world, and it begins at home. It begins with how you show up in your own life. It begins with how you show up in your own communities, because now, as people become self-empowered, as people kind of find their own greatness and find their own inner potential, that's how we can reclaim our future. Because I truly believe the best way to predict the future is to create it, but it's down to us to create a better vision for the future than the one we're being presented with. So yes, we can resist things that, like we're doing the Together Declaration, togetherdeclaration.org. We have to slow down the progress of some of these things, the mission creep. We have to reject some of these things along the way. But that's not all we can do. We have to also create. And I believe that when we come together, not only can we resist some of these things, but we can co-create a better world as well.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And, it was absolutely beautifully put. Love it. Guys and girls, you heard it there from the man himself. Get on the Together Declaration, togetherdeclaration.org. I'll put it obviously in the show notes. Dan, I know you pressed time, mate, but thank you so much for joining us again. And to share with us everything about the movement that you're doing and how people can get on board. And please, guys, just like Dan said, look for the hero within. Start today, okay? After you've signed up to the declaration, and look for the hero within. We all can do it. Every single one of us have got a part to play now moving forward.
Absolutely, it's down to us. Thank you very much, AJ.
Guys and girls, thanks for joining us, and please look forward to another great episode in a few days on the AJ Roberts Show. But from me and Dan, look after yourself, stay strong, and carry on fighting together.